Move it, nerd. That was my life. Being constantly pushed around because I happened to enjoy computers and horror and hung around people who also liked those things. I had friends, I had a loving family, and I had great grades, but did that matter? No, not even a little. People always made fun of my jet black hair and overly pale skin. Could I help being born this way? I was not about to change my life for some idiots who clearly had no life because they had time to make fun of me. I ignored the jock who shouldered past me, grabbing my history books from my locker. I closed the door and spun the lock around so the number stopped at random. I did not need anyone breaking into my locker and stealing something. I made my way down the crowded hallway. Most people stopped and stared at me. I don't belong here. I already know that, but who cares? The first chance I got, I was going to move away from this town with my best guy friend Jamie and become a professional animator. That's right, while these idiots are wasting their lives thinking about parties and sports, I was going to have a life when I got older doing something I like to do instead of sitting in a crowded office cubicle. Adora! A voice called my name. I turned to see Jamie hurrying over to me. Jamie had handsome features and pretty blonde hair, but everyone disregarded him because he hung out with, well, me. Hey, Jamie, I said, smiling. What's up? He said, slightly out of breath from his quick sprint. I rolled my eyes. Nothing. You? I finally finished Unknown World, he said with a big grin on his face, which I returned. Unknown World was his fanfiction / in-game reality story about the horror game Amnesia: The Dark Descent. He had been working on it for months, always saying how this would be his big ticket to becoming a professional writer. I supported him 100% no matter how random things got. Jamie, that's great! I exclaimed, pulling him into a hug. That was another rumor that me and Jamie were dating. I could never imagine myself dating my guy friend. That would be too weird. He pulled back after a second. I want you to read it as soon as possible, he said excitedly. Of course, I said happily. Jamie made me feel like a normal 14-year-old again. We planned to move to New York when we got older and share an apartment with 2 guest rooms, which we would turn into a writer's studio for Jamie and a computer room for me. Then when we both found our own lovers, we could move away and sell the apartment for a lot of money for which we could split. Our kids would become best friends, and who knows, maybe they would get together too. We made our way to the hall that separated our classrooms. I bid him goodbye and made my way into a history class. I sat at my desk at the window, which I loved, and smiled at my teacher, Mrs. Boyer. The mean kids liked to call her Mrs. Boyle since she easily got mad at the kids who fell asleep in class, but she was actually super nice. All my teachers were, at least they liked me. Morning, Mrs. Boyer, I said happily, opening my books to the page indicated on the chalkboard. Morning, Adora. How are you? She asked kindly. Fine. How are you? Oh, I'm good. With the school pep rally coming up soon, I've been terribly busy, though. I nodded, listening to her. Everyone thought it was weird that I talked to the teachers like they were my friends. Really, though, they did a lot for us considering they provided us with an education that we would use for the rest of our life. The lesson went as normal. Mrs. Boyer yelled at the school hunk, Josh Henderson, for falling asleep in the middle of her talking. Then a girl was caught putting on lip gloss when Mrs. Boyer was talking about Jefferson Davis and got scolded, and so on. I think I was the only one who actually learned anything in Mrs. Boyer's class. School went on as normal, and when I got home, I was greeted by my mother. Well, not my real mother. Mary Kate was my adoptive mother, and her husband Sean was my adoptive father. They loved me to bits, but I couldn't say the same about my brother James. We weren't real siblings, only related through law, and he always hated all the attention I received from mother and father. They adopted me when they learned my real parents were separated. My real mother was murdered, and my father went missing. I never learned what their names were, and I don't think anyone really knows, maybe not even the government. "Welcome home, Adora," Mother greeted. I smiled in return. I placed my bag on the kitchen table, and since I had done my homework in study hall, I hurried up to my room to play video games. My favorite was Halo, seeing as I could relate to the main character, John, since he had been taken from his real home and placed somewhere he didn't belong. I soon became bored, however, since I played the campaign several times and had practically memorized the dialogue. I sat up from my chair I used for gaming and glanced outside. The weather outside was nice, so I decided to go swimming in the lake in the woods behind my house. Mother and Father went grocery shopping, so I wrote them a note telling them where I was going in case they came back to an empty house. Thankfully, James was sleeping over at a friend's house, so I knew he couldn't mess up my note. I grabbed my one-piece suit, put it on, and took a towel with me as I made my way into the woods, my flip-flops hitting the dirt with every step I took. I loved the forest. It was my home away from home, where no one could judge me, where the birds chirped whatever melody they wanted. Soon the lake came into view, and I threw my towel over a tree branch that overlooked the lake, so I could grab it when I came out of the water. Hesitating, I dipped my toes into the water. Once I was sure of the water's warmth, I put my whole foot into the crystal clear water. Soon my whole body was in the water except my head, and I floated in the deep pond. I never swam underwater in this pond. The idea compelled me, the cold water engulfing my head as I would finally get to see what lay under the surface. I bit my lip. If I did go underwater, I would have to hold my breath, and I wasn't the best at that. I could only hold my breath for 30 seconds, and by then I was most likely unconscious from lack of air. Then again, if I did go underwater, I would finally get to see what lay under the deep. I sighed as I began to take a deep breath. Closing my eyes, I slid under the water. After a second, I opened my eyes to find myself to a completely beautiful area. The pond surface hid beautiful rocks and plants. I swam under deeper to collect one of the rocks, moving my body like a mermaid. I managed to get to the bottom of the pond, which was easily 10 feet under ground level. I grabbed a rock and I started to swim back up when something was wrong. My foot was stuck.